Right, that's go. Excellent.
For posterity. There we go. Welcome everyone. Good to see you, Phil. There we are. Mr. McKibben, how you doing?
Good evening. Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing?
Perfect. Right, where are
All right. I expect we'll have a couple people joining over the next few minutes, but knowing how these things go, I think we'll probably make a start, and hopefully people can play a very short amount of catch up as we get going with the wine. So yeah, a couple more people joining now. Excellent. Good evening, everyone. First time we've hosted a club evening like this for a little while, or a club tasting at least. So lovely to see you all, some club members, which is always great to see. And I think we have a couple of new faces on the session tonight. So yeah, a very quick bit of housekeeping to get us going. We are recording the session as usual. So a few people that can't join on the evening tonight, they can watch it back. And so anyone who doesn't particularly want to be on the video, then it's time to turn your cameras off. But hopefully, we're definitely encouraging of comments and feedback and everything kind of as we go. If you'd like to throw anything into the chat function, please do. Please throw anything in there. But we actually have a little bit of tech, which I'll let Charlie introduce in a moment, which hopefully we'll get a little bit more feedback, a few more comments coming through on that, in a little bit more of a focused kind of way. Just to get everyone started, I would definitely pour the first wine and get going. I'll give you the full order. There's a bit of a change to the lineup as there often is, but we're starting with wine number one. So we start nice and simple. So wine number one, the Mary Lebeau Viognier. I'd like to get that poured at least and make a start whenever you're ready. And yes, we're very lucky, obviously, to be joined by one of the stars really at the forefront of South Africa's wine industry, Bruce Jack. Good evening, Bruce. I'll introduce you. I'll let you introduce yourself properly in just a moment. For anyone who's not met me before, my name's Luke. I'm running the Premier Cru Club at Honest Grapes with Angus. It's wave, Angus. There he is. And we've got Nathan Hill on the call tonight as well. So MD, a couple of other team members. Actually, I can see James down there, and then Red, I think. And also we have Charlie, who I'll just throw you over to now to introduce the aforementioned bit of tech.
Just a quick bit. So what we're using just for you guys to interact a little bit more is an app called Vivox. I'll just show you what it looks like over here. It's essentially a Q&A app. I'll send you the link just now in the chat function, but we'll put up some questions for you guys to answer, and do get involved, because the more answers we get, the more interesting it becomes. So it goes onto your phone, so you don't have to use different screens. So you'll see just on your mobile phones if you click on the link, or there is the Vivox apps with the actual picture here. If you just use your phone camera, you'll get connected to that quite easily with your phones, and then you can join in on the Vivox app. So do take a picture of that. Otherwise, I'll put it up in a minute. Otherwise, and also I'll send you a link. But now I'm going to put you back to Bruce. Very short. Well, I'll let Luke do the introductions for now, and we'll see how we get along.
So I've just realised I very rudely didn't mention Catherine there, who's helped facilitate everything. Also joining us from South Africa. So cheers, Catherine. Yes, thanks. If anyone has any questions or queries about how to use the Vivox, if you can't get it going, just give us a shout and we'll be able to give you a little bit of guidance on that. But also, please feel free to throw anything into the chat. We'll take any longer-winded questions at the end, but hopefully we've got 6 wines in front of us. There's plenty to be getting on with, but we'll try and keep it to an hour, and then we'll have any questions that come through at the end, and hopefully take care of all that kind of thing. Last thing before we get going, we're going to change the order of the wines quite considerably. Like I said, we are starting with wine number one, thankfully, but then I've actually got this written on a different piece of paper because the rest is changing quite a lot. So the second wine will be wine number 6, Chenin Blanc, which Angus has kindly put in the chat just there. So if you get lost in this, or if you want to note it down, but we'll go with wine number 6, the Bourg Bacquepin Chenin Blanc, and then the third wine will be the Heartbreak Grape Pinot Noir. The fourth wine will be Movable Feast, which is wine number 3. The fifth wine will be the Pinotage, and then we'll be finishing on the Mary Labeau Red. Yeah. So yeah, if you just need to refer back to that, or if you're lost, just shout and we'll
to be honest, Luke, to be honest, it wouldn't be a Honest Grapes tasting without a change of order. So we like to keep everyone on their toes, you see. So that's
one of the unique characteristics. Yeah, one of the many unique characteristics. Right. Without further ado, yeah, there's plenty to be getting on with. So, Bruce Jack, I've only really fairly recently been introduced to Bruce's wines. Some of you may have been familiar for quite a while. I believe you've been making wine since 1993 in South Africa and Australia, and well beyond that as well. So entrepreneur, vintner, philanthropist, brand owner, publisher too, I believe, and I'm sure I've missed a few things off that list. And we're kind of familiar with him. Made a move into the world of corporate winemaking, Constellation / Accolade, a little while back, and then back into the more independently minded wines, in creating what we've got in front of us today. So we'll get tasting very shortly. I'm sure we can't really go through this evening's session with being able to ignore what's happened over the last 18 months. And so it'd be fascinating to hear an insight from on the ground in South Africa. And yeah, I think that there's been lots of initiatives on your side, but just the general kind of scene would be really interesting to hear about. But anyway, we love a story here at Honest Grapes, and I'm sure you've got plenty to say about each of the wines. So I'll hand over to you, Bruce, so you can introduce yourself properly, and we can get started with the wines.
Cool, thanks, Luke. Or should I say, thank you, Cool Hand Luke. Very impressive introduction. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to Honest Grapes for giving me the opportunity. And of course, thank you to everyone who's joined in this day and age when we're allowed to go out in public, in the UK at least, to do an online Zoom call as we've done to survive in the last 18 months. It's very rare and very special. I appreciate it. Obviously, we've got immediate issues happening in South Africa at the moment. I was saying to the guys earlier that it's first time I've done a wine tasting while a coup d'etat is actually happening in my own country. So we'll see how that plays out. I think the next 72 hours are going to be critical. It's a lot worse than it probably is being reported in the BBC. We're obviously getting first-hand knowledge. In fact, one of my winemakers is a guy called Thornton Pillay. He's based here with me on the Drift estate, which is my home estate. His dad is a superette owner, or a little supermarket owner in KwaZulu-Natal, and his place of business was burned to the ground, along with everything else in that part of Natal. So it's pretty frightening what's happening out there. But if Chateau Moussard were able to make wine and bottle it during a civil war, there's no reason why South Africans aren't as resilient. And I think I think it's a human characteristic, but perhaps it's a characteristic that as South Africans we've honed a little bit more recently than everybody else, our resilience. And I said to Catherine earlier, I said, how many people are really interested in doing a wine tasting on an evening like this? And she said, no, they're like 35 people coming to the tasting. And I said, oh, Kat, give me the guy's email address. I'm gonna email him. I don't feel like doing it. And I was about to do that, and she stopped me. So you can thank Catherine for for us all being here tonight, because although my appetite's gone, as soon as I opened the first bottle of wine, which is the Mary Labeau Viognier, I suddenly did realize that, of course, this wonderful product, which has stood us in good stead as civilizations across the eons, also brings a lot of solace. And actually probably exactly what I need this evening. It's a nice glass of wine. So the first wine is the Mary Labeau Viognier. Those of you in the UK will know the church, St Mary Labeau. It's in Cheapside. If you're born in the in the sound of the Bow Bell, then of course you're a true Cockney. And it's and there behind there probably is an interesting story, but I think because we're going to start and end, which is a nice loop with these wines, I should maybe try and explain a little bit why we've got all these different names and brand names on the table before we get going. So the business of Brucejack Wines, which is embarrassingly named after myself, is a global winemaking business. We make wine in South Africa, in Chile, in America, in California. We make wine in Spain, in La Rioja. I also make wine throughout Spain, but for Brucejack, I just make wine in La Rioja. And we will be soon launching a range from Australia as well. Is everyone there? Oh, good. What fruits do you get?
Sorry, so Bruce, just to stop you freaking out, this is part of our Vivox. It's just so people can share a little bit. It's our word cloud, so it just lets them sort of show what they're tasting as part of the wine itself. So I'll probably throw those in whilst you're talking, but don't panic. Everyone can hear you.
It's a proof that the British can multitask, which is a good sign.
Thank you.
So the all the wines that we're going to taste tonight are obviously from the same stable, the Brucejack wine stable, but this particular wine, the Mary Lebow, is from a farm in an area called Ashton, which is in the mountains just above the town of Robertson, which is really due northeast from here. And I'll talk a little bit about where I am, because that's also a fairly special part of the world. And this and Viognier is a variety very close to my heart. The very first time I tasted Viognier, of course, was Condrieu. It was I did my master's degree in literature at the University of St Andrews in Scotland before I did a winemaking degree at Adelaide University in Australia. And the first time I tasted was at one of those student parties that kind of went the whole night. And sort of towards the sunrise on an early Edinburgh summer's morning, so we're talking 4:20 or something, I was given the keys to the cellar and suggested that maybe I should go down and pick something to watch the sunrise with. And being a wine nerd, of course, I went to look for Condrieu, because I don't think there's anything else there isn't another variety that encapsulates sunshine like Viognier. I've always been absolutely in love with it, and have collected widely prior to becoming a winemaker. We were the first people, as a result, to make Viognier in South Africa. I got hold of the initial plantings by the University of Stellenbosch, which were experimental plantings on the Helderberg, which is the mountain outside Stellenbosch. And our first vintage was in 2000. So so we've been doing it for a while. 21 years, and this is the 2019 vintage, which was really tough because it was at the end of a 4-year drought for us in the Western Cape. It was the last year of that drought, and the vines took a lot of strain. And this is one of the wonderful things about a variety like Viognier, because it can handle that kind of difficulty when it comes to environmental conditions. One of the reasons why Robert Hill Smith of Yalumba, the oldest family-owned winery in Australia, was the person who brought the variety and really saved Viognier from a sort of disappearing off the planet. It was Robert Hill Smith, a New World winemaker in the Barossa Valley, who created this opportunity for New World Viognier. And I think what we've tried to do is create a wine here that is kind of between Old World and New World, with the florality of the New World, but with the wonderful minerality of the Old World. And I think it's a wonderful wine to start. The florality hits you, all those lovely little notes there that you've given us. What's it called? Auto suggest for us. Thank you. Help. At least we don't have to think too hard.
Oh, so everyone's it's pretty popular so far.
Hey, good stuff, guys. Well done. I'll tell you the story of where Mary Lebow comes from at the last wine. Otherwise, I have nothing to say about it. That's not quite true. I'll probably talk the hind leg off about 15 donkeys this evening. Okay, so we're on to the second wine, which is the Brucejack Wines Heritage range. So this is the top range that we do. We make this range across all the countries, including Chile. We're about to launch a Napa Malbec under the heritage range, and in South Africa, the white we do is a Chenin Blanc. We are going to be this will be joined by a Chardonnay at some stage, but Chenin is a wonderful variety in South Africa. It's the Afrikaans word for it is steen. Steen means stone or rock. It's kind of the cornerstone of the South African wine industry. And with Chenin, we know it's an incredibly versatile variety. You can make all sorts of different styles of wine. And I'm not just talking Loire or South Africa, but you can make, you can make very sweet wines. You can make very, excuse me. That's very strange. I've got my alarm going off on one of my sheep.
Multitasking.
So what we've got these collars on the sheep, and I've cancelled all other sounds on my phone, but the only thing that goes off are my sheep alarms. So
Bruce, I have to say, in over 300 wine therapy sessions since the pandemic started, I don't think anybody has used that as the reason for interrupting their flow, but it's a great one, and we'll remember that one forever. Thank you.
Well, it could be two things this time of the year, but my suspicion, if it's in that particular block on the farm, is that it's probably what we call a rooikat or a caracal. I don't think any human would be stupid enough to get that close to the mountain, but you never know. Anyway, my manager's got it now, so let's hope. Anyway, how exciting is that? Oh, live sheep theft, as well as everything else that's going on. While we drink a variety that's named, the saying "Boer maak 'n plan" means farmer make a plan, and it's really I think it's what sums up farmers everywhere in the world. Really, you are always at this like really strange juncture where, if the weather doesn't sort you out, bad luck does, and if you manage to escape those two arrows, you normally screwed up yourself. So you've got to rely on yourself to make a plan with what you've got going. This is an old vineyard. It's officially, we have South Africa, from a wine industry perspective, has started a lot of firsts, and one of them is called the Old Vine Project. So we're the first country in the world to have actually written down a set of regulations around old vine. They have to be over 30 years old, and that South African system is now being adopted by the OIV, which is the organization that oversees wine law around the world, based in France. So yeah, it's another feather in the cap of the South African wine industry. So this is an old vine. It's planted in 1976. And it's barrel fermented, as you can taste, got 100% through malolactic, no addition of yeast, no addition of tartaric acid or any of those things. You just crush the grapes, and because the vines are sold and so in balance, the crop is so small that the wine actually can make itself. This is from an area called Rawsonville, which is about an hour and a half drive north of Cape Town. And it's really the home of the best Chenin in South Africa. So we don't put anything under the heritage range, which we don't think is going to be world class. We're not trying to make a Loire style at all. We do want to have the characteristic of longevity that you get from nice Loire wines, but we're not interested in adding the excessive amounts of sulfur or having the excessive acidity that some of those wines have that make them undrinkable for 10 years. We are interested in providing joy for our consumers as soon as possible. And I think that's one of the things that I've always been interested in is to look at a wine, not just from a wine nerd perspective, which of course I am, but also from the consumer's perspective, and have that in mind, even though sometimes my ego can get out of control and I try and do things that really suit me and my palate rather than other people's. At the back of my mind is this little voice that keeps going, you people have got to enjoy it, boy. So I think with that comes sort of almost how would I describe it? A sort of a Manet sensibility when it comes to the artistic side of winemaking. You do want to be able to enjoy it yourself for your palate, obviously, and things have to have integrity. There needs to be an authenticity about your craft, but at the same time, you can't be an absolute egotistical idiot. Okay.
Am I right in thinking you started briefly in retail, Bruce? Is that right? So you know at least what your market there was interested in and what they enjoyed drinking at the time.
You've done your research, Cool Hand. You have.
I've done a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, good man. I like you. Now look, that's exactly where it comes from. So the focus on the consumer, I think I've been blessed with starting in retail. I started in retail really early. I was 16 years old. And it was my granny's idea because it meant she could get her whiskey at staff prices. That's why most people work in the wine industry, buy cheap booze, right? And it sort of developed from there. Within a couple of years, I became fascinated by labels and by new vintages. And obviously, like all of us at that age, drinking beer and playing rugby and not taking this thing too seriously, and it sort of crept up on me. And I fell in love with the retail side of it. I fell in love with watching someone walk through the door and guessing what they were going to go for. Were they going to go and buy a bottle of brandy, or were they going to surprise you and go for a nice, in those days, the wines that were shooting out the lights in South Africa were first growth Bordeaux's, and I mean, we had DRCs in the shop and stuff, which of course you could never afford now with our hopeless currency. But it was fascinating to be able to come to grips with the wine industry through understanding how a consumer sees it. And I think that's always played a role. And I've said this before on a number of occasions, that if you look at the British wine scene now, a lot of the people that are creating change and doing really exciting new things, driving the industry in so many positive ways, are people that fell in love with the industry through retail, and particularly Oddbins. But of course, Majestic also played a role, Wine Rack, etc. And those are the people who are still there, creating things. And I think that's fantastic, because the British wine scene is extraordinary. It's the crucible of all wine markets. It's where you make or break a brand. It's where you make or break a reputation. You cannot supply wine for very long unless you may be really, really good French Burgundy producer that is subpar at an extraordinary price. You're going to get found out. And we obviously don't have the luxury of being in Burgundy. We're in the bottom of a big dark continent that is confusing and complex called Africa. So we have to over deliver. And if you don't, you're dead. So there we go. What retail does to you, as you guys well know. Number 3, talking about heartbreak. There we go. This is why we're resilient, right? Heartbreak grape Pinot Noir. Has everybody got that in their little bottle? God, I hope those wines how long have the wines been in the bottle, Luke?
Just a couple of days, I think. Were they bottled on Friday, I think?
No, they were actually bottled on Monday. They're bottled under argon gas, so they last about 6 weeks, but we try and keep it as fresh as possible.
Fantastic. Well, why did you use argon, by the way?
It's not our choice, and neither is the misprint in lineup of the labels. We use an outside company who are very good, but their choice of gas is argon. I think it's probably one of the easier gases to get hold of to work to avoid any oxygen getting in. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, it's the most noble gas, of course. The chemists among us will know that, or those of you who can still remember your AO levels. And it's which means that it's the most non-reactionary gas. It also doesn't dissolve into the wine, which CO2 does. And it's very, very heavy. So it's during the turbulence of filling, it's the most effective. I don't think it's the easiest to get hold of, although you never know with COVID. But it's certainly it's certainly the most expensive. So I'm impressed, guys. Well done. So Pinot Noir, who doesn't love a Pinot Noir, right? Why is it called Heartbreak Grape? Well, again, this is part of the heritage range. So we're really pulling out the big guns tonight. Pinot Noir is a very odd variety. I'm going to use my example of Burgundy. Look, I love Burgundy, by the way. so I'm not trying to be a Burgundy knocker at all, but if you travel around Burgundy, let's be honest, and you taste maybe 20 Pinot Noirs, red Burgundies in a day, the first 15 will be pretty disappointing. You'll have 3 which you can, take to your mother-in-law for Christmas, and then there will be these 2 at the end, and one of those will change your life, and that's because Pinot Noir, and there's certain other varieties out there that do this, very few, but Pinot Noir is probably the king of them. They are absolutely life-changing and they're brilliant. But the reality is that most of them are disappointing. And certainly most of them are overpriced. And that's where the heartbreak comes in. It's not enough for you not to be interested in grappling with the variety from a grower's perspective. It's not enough to stop you wanting to make the wine. In fact, it is what keeps you coming back, both as a consumer who've been ripped off numerous times with disappointing bottles, let's be honest, where you smile nervously at your guests around the table and say, oh yes, no, this is meant to be an elegant vintage, where what you really mean is that it's watery and disappointing. You keep going back because every now and then, every 20 or so bottles, you fall in love with it. And the other thing about Pinot is that you can fall in love with it from the very first sip right to the very last sip of the bottle. And there are very few varieties that you can do that with. So it's a combination of those things that I think keeps me coming back to this variety. And although it has broken my heart on numerous occasions and unrequited love we're all used to in some form or another, this is a variety that I think any serious winemaker worth their salt or their romantic salt is going to want to plant and going to want to have a go at, and going to want to try and aim for that piece of heaven. So this is an extraordinary wine in that it's made from 3 different areas, which is unusual in South Africa for Pinot Noir. This is a sort of not a technique, but a philosophy I learned when I was working at Accolade. So Accolade's the 4th biggest wine business in the world. I was the head winemaker for Accolade South Africa for a number of years, and then ended up actually as group winemaker living in Australia, responsible for the sort of style direction of our main brands, including a brand called Hardy's. But of course, there was a senior winemakers there as well, and our top range, things like Eileen Hardy, etc., we were making from very small parcels of fantastic fruit around Australia. So there's no reason why I thought we shouldn't take advantage of the laws in South Africa and other New World winemaking countries to make the best possible wine we can. So this is from an area called Hemelanada Valley, which is just down the road in a place called Hermanus, which is really the home of Pinot Noir, or a good Pinot Noir in South Africa. The pioneering winemaker there or farm is called Hamilton Russell, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. Absolutely fantastic wine, really the father of quality Pinot Noir in South Africa. And then we have so about 30% from the Hemelanada Valley, a vineyard very close to the Hamilton Russell vineyards. We've got 30% from my own estate, and when I say mine, I mean me and the Banks estate, which is where I live, right up on the hill, and in the most difficult place you can possibly want to plant a vineyard, but it's full of interesting soils that Pinot Noir love. And then another 30% from an area called Elim, spelled Elim, which is the southernmost wine growing area in South Africa, right at the very southern tip of Africa, with extraordinary soils that actually originally come from Antarctica. So it's the only wine growing area in the world where the soils originally Antarctic. 330 million years ago, the last supercontinent, Gondwana, was created when Antarctica, Africa, South America, India, and Australia crashed together. They formed the incredible Cape Fold Mountains, which you see above. They also, it was also the what was responsible for, of course, all the embarrassment of minerals that South Africa has. One of the reasons why you can't make an atomic bomb without strategic minerals from South Africa, which of course is one of the reasons why apartheid lasted so long, because those minerals needed to go back to the West, right? And as soon as the Berlin Wall fell down, what happened next? Mandela was released. Apartheid was too embarrassing to put up with, and anyway, the minerals were safe. another fascinating thing about South Africa very few people know. So when you plant grapes in areas like that, particularly in soils that are this intensely infused with minerality unseen anywhere else in the rest of the world, you get a focused concentration of flavors and aromas, which I think, I'm particularly proud of this vintage under very difficult circumstances, because that's the sort of thing you can fall in love with. I'm running out of time, guys. I'm talking too much.
We're just about bang on schedule.
Yeah, you're doing three wines in, half an hour down. We're good. We're good.
Yeah,
are we good?
Charlotte's slowly sweating in the background, going, "Please let him go. Please let him chat." But it's all right. You're doing well.
Does anyone have any comments while we're about halfway through on the wines we've had so far? Anything that you've not been able to put into the word map,
or questions for Bruce directly?
Of course, yeah.
But Bruce, how do you manage to farm in so many places around the world?
It's a really good question. So I have a team of winemakers, obviously. We're a big company. But I think I only work in areas where I've worked before. So I started a brand with a master wine called Ed Adams in Spain, 2005. So 16 vintages in there, a brand called La Bascula. It's represented by Butner. I don't know if you guys have tasted any of those. We make wines in Catalonia, just south of a little village called Gandesa, and La Rioja, and in Rias Baxas up in the north west. And we've dabbled everywhere really in Spain, but those are the three places we really focus on. So Spain is very close to my heart. My mother was a musician and a writer. She was actually originally born in Zimbabwe. And she would have been, she's not with us now, but I would love to hear what she has to say about the current civil unrest that we're experiencing at the moment. She would have some really interesting insights as a Zimbabwean. She played the flamenco guitar. She was a classically trained musician. She was a musical prodigy and an incredible musician. But she fell in love with flamenco. So from a very early age, I understood what paella was, and I was brought up. I was brought up with flamenco and chorizo and tapa, and my mom spoke Spanish. She spent a lot of time in Spain, and so for me, having the opportunity to go back and make wine in Spain was sort of like a natural progression from the Spanish. Although we obviously Anglo-Saxon white South Africans, the infusion of the Spanish cuisine and language and the flavors and aromas and the passion that comes with flamenco, and the history, of course, very misunderstood history, by the way, which I can bore you about, it was kind of with me all my life growing up. And of course, the first opportunity I got when Ed approached me and said, "Why don't we go make some wine in Spain?" And my mom was still alive, and it was just a no-brainer, as they say, and fell in love with that. So Spain is a very important part of the Bruce Jack brand as a result. Chile, I went there as the group head winemaker for Accolade. We started a brand called Anaquena, which was a big supermarket brand out of Chile. So I got to know Chile very well as a result and just fell in love with it. I mean, the Spanish obviously has a little bit to do with it and the culture. But for me, the people are incredibly warm, and there are a lot of similarities, particularly between the disparity of the haves and have-nots in Spain, the indigenous and non-indigenous, and what looks like a very convoluted history from a South African perspective is actually quite simple, and I feel very at home there. And I just love working with the people that we work with, and the country's beautiful. So been working there for about a decade, and with very good people that I know very well. I have a head winemaker called Marlise. I wish she was on the call, actually. She's based in Canada, of all places. We've been working together since 2002 on various projects. She is the best winemaker in the world, a lot better than me. And she runs the projects that I can't get to. It's been really difficult during COVID, asked some of the questions about COVID, but luckily, thank God for DHL and other courier companies, we're able to get samples around with our understanding and the technology that we have now. where, you know, I mean, Marlies actually has a program where the head cellar hands of the different wineries wear a little camcorder on their shirt, and you can actually walk around with them and see what's going on in the winery. And everything is done through analysis and through tasting. So we are able to continue making wine despite COVID, just because we've been able to overcome, like this call. We've been able to overcome distance through the magic of technology, and embracing the best and positive bits of that technology have been an absolute lifesaver, particularly for, you know, countries like South Africa, where we really are up against it in so many ways. To be able to reach out to our market, you are our lifeline, and I don't mean that glibly. In a situation like this that we're facing, and not just now, but for the last 18 months with the local, you know, booze bans. If we hadn't have had our overseas market, and we haven't had the technology that we're demonstrating this evening, we would not be here tonight. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Bruce. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to taste your wines.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I don't know if you can see the chat function here, but Julia's put in a lovely comment. Lovely depth and sophistication to each of the wines so far. And then I'm pretty sure this one is from Mike. Says, would Bruce ever experiment with Nebbiolo? And I don't know where you might think that the best opportunity for you to do that would be, in South Africa or otherwise, but
Australia.
Exactly. McLaren Vale, Nebbiolo country, baby.
Sure.
No, look, Nebbiolo, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Bobal, Monastrell. These are varieties that have that X factor, you know, when so many of them are disappointing, so many of them are out of balance, but when they write, they just sing. It's poetry, you know, it's heaven. Nebbiolo is like Pinot for me on those levels. South Africa has a problem. We don't have really good cyan material, the fruiting material of Nebbiolo, unfortunately. We have had it in the country for a while. There are new cuttings that have come in. I would really want to plant that on my estate. When I say really, it isn't my estate. I mean, every day I think about it, it's like less my estate than it ever was. But the estate that I happen to live on with my vines, I'd like to plant it, but I don't think it'll work here. And I'll tell you why, because Barbera works here. And what I know about the north of Italy, and particularly around Alba and those areas, is that when Nebbiolo works, Barbera doesn't, and vice versa. You know, where Nebbiolo really cracks ahead like Pinot and changes your life when you taste it, the Barbera's on the other side of the hill. So I'm a little cautious as a result, and I think because I'm getting older and less moneyed, I can probably take less chances than I used to. So I think I'll stick to McLaren Vale, because there's some incredible examples coming out of McLaren Vale at the moment from a New World perspective. But if you really want to make Nebbiolo, I think maybe a little trip to Florence after COVID is probably in order, and we'll go chat to some friendly Italians and see what we can pull out of the bag there under Bruce Jack. Sounds like a good thing. Also, I love, you know, I can't get enough truffles. So you just got to time the trip properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the autumn, I think a lot of us have got a lot of backdated wine trips. They're all desperately looking forward to. So that can be added to the list for sure. Okay, so wine number 4.
I got to tell you one story about Alba. Okay, so we're talking proper Nebbiolo, Barbera country. We land obviously on the way to Florence. Sleep a night in Alba. So it was a summer's night. It was quite sweltering, and we arrived in the dark, and we were put into one of those sort of what felt like a sort of an airport hotel, you know, bog standard 3-star story. And opened the window. Thank God it had opening windows, and it was just an incredible smell came through the window. It's like, oh my God, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it was just the most gorgeous, comforting, wonderful, embracing smell. And I just sort of stood at the window and breathed it in for a good 5 minutes, and then went to bed and just had the most incredible sleep. I slept deeply with beautiful dreams. And I woke up the next morning and I went to the window, and there was the Ferrero Rocher factory over the road. So I think where you got it. Hats off to the Northern Italians. You've when they do things, they do them properly, and they always taste good. So there's nothing wrong with that. But Barbera actually was inspired. That trip inspired me to look at Barbera, and we planted on a neighboring farm, not a neighboring farmer, another project that I was doing for someone else. I never thought it would work on our estate, but we planted it actually by mistake. It was sent to us. I was actually trying to plant Tempranillo, and the cuttings arrived. And so we ended up planting Barbera because we couldn't send them back for various reasons. And it's now sort of our cult wine under the Drift label. It's called Gift Horse. And we put it into our blend, which is the Movable Feast blend as well. So this is the estate blend. So this is the French are very disparaging, right? Often of New World wineries. They're like knocking us, And I've got a very good French winemaker friend, makes biodynamic wine down in the Languedoc-Roussillon. And he said to me, is this your village wine, huh? To be disparaging. It's actually my top wine. It's your village wine because the whole village is on the label. There we go. It's not the whole village, it's my family. So this is a blend of kind of all the varieties that we've got planted on the estate, but mostly Malbec and Shiraz. Malbec and Shiraz are generally always the dominant varieties. What vintage have you got there? Because there was one. Have you got the 2015, Luke? Have a look.
We do, yeah. We got the 2015.
Okay, so 15 was a cracking vintage. This is a wine that it's going to take at least 10 years before it even starts opening up. Have you got the screw cap or cork version?
We have the screw cap version. The guys won't know, obviously, but the wines that came to us were under screw cap.
Okay, so trust me on this. I think this is gonna start opening up 2025, and will drink well to 2035. I reckon that probably 2030 is going to be the peak for this wine under screw cap. Cork will start aging a little earlier. Let's see what you put up, because if you don't put up Garden Herbs, I'll be very disappointed. when you take like lovely Italian herbs, we're talking thyme, rosemary, basil, that kind of stuff, maybe a bit of bay in the back there, and you smell them, fresh garden herbs. There's a herbaceousness to this wine, which is very unusual for South Africa. And that's the reason is because, Catherine, aren't you meant to be putting up pictures? I'm prattling away here like a wally. Should you put a picture of the farm up? Can you do that?
I'll stop sharing and then she can do that.
Yeah. So Catherine is the most amazing human being in the whole world. And she, basically the business would not exist without Catherine. She puts up with my nonsense. I'm pretending to be the important person. But the whole business is really Catherine. My Benjamin, who you met earlier, my son came in before the crowds arrived. And he said to me at dinner the other night, Kat, he said, so Dad, how did Kat start as your PA and end up as the emperor? So there we go. I thought you like that. Here we go. Have we got a picture coming? There we go. I think, can you get the one, Kat? Can you do the one of the temperatures? That's quite interesting. Well, very interesting to try and explain this wine to people. So the reason why I wanted to try and, we had this whole presentation I completely forgot about because I'm such a nonce. But the reason is that the farm is on the southernmost mountain range in Africa, which is pretty cool. It is 45 kilometers from the coast. So from the southern tip of Africa, and it's the sort of it's where, there we go. It's where Africa kind of ended before Gondwana. It's the last kind of mountain range. So to the north of this mountain range, we have, there we go. To the north of this mountain range, we have the original Africa, and to the south of this mountain range, we have Antarctica. And so the little red dot you see there on your screen, if you can see it, that is where the farm is. And there are very few wine farms this far south because it's too bloody cold. And when I say that, to put into perspective, we are a little bit warmer than Burgundy, but we are much cooler than Bordeaux when it comes to average temperatures during ripening season. So that's partly because of how far south we are. When people think of Africa and South Africa, you think of nice warm climates and, you know, going to Newlands cricket ground. But there are a lot of cool areas, particularly because altitude and our coastal winds play a huge role. So in summer, our predominant wind is from the southeast. It blows over a very cold ocean, which is normally around about 11 degrees. And it starts blowing at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. It blows every single day. And by 11 o'clock, you've had your maximum temperature for the day. It's like switching on an air conditioner every single day. So these are temperature maps. Oh, go back, Kat. These are temperature maps. And where you see the purple is where your average ripening temperature. So you'll see on the, like near Cape Town is on the left-hand side, where areas like Constantia, above that is Durbanville, also a cooler area. Stellenbosch, one of the reasons why that's cool. And it's really an indication of the terrain. So as the wind blows, one of the things is that as Africa warms up, this big dry continent, it sucks the air in off the ocean. And as it comes up, it's as we all know from our geography lessons, O-level geography, that for every 100 meters in altitude, the temperature drops by 0.6 degrees centigrade. So we are on a mountain of 1,000 meters above sea level. It is the same height as Table Mountain. It is, in fact, originally part of the original Table Mountain range, which was 14 kilometers high. After Gondwana, it has been eroded over the last 330 million years, and we actually plant our grapes in the soil that has been eroded, which makes the soil that we plant in the oldest soil in the world, which is another weird reason why we're called the New World, where in fact this is where not only did the human race come from, but we also plant in the oldest soil. And if soil is part of terroir, and if soil is part of the soul and heart and quality of a wine, then we really are the old world, and you guys are the new world. Chew on that for a while. Okay. Thanks, Kat. Look, I love maps, right? And I love those kind of maps. But this is why we get the herbaceousness. This is why we get that almost what you consider to be, one can consider to be more European style in terms of its herbaceousness. And it's not a greenness. It's just a herbaceousness, which is actually really beguiling and wonderfully complemented by the deep, dark, black fruit characters. You know, this is not this crunchiness to the fruit, which is a characteristic for me of altitude anywhere in the world, which is almost like when you bite into like a black currant. It's like from the fridge, you know, it's that kind of crunchiness. I just love this wine. It's called Movable Feast, obviously, because I stole that from Ernest Hemingway. That was the title of his sort of small little autobiography of his early years. And I, you know, I can't use it for an autobiography because it's already been used. I thought I'd use it for a wine, but it sums up a lot about what we want to do. And as a result, obviously the blend changes slightly every year. I'm not going to pour this out. I'm going to leave that because as this wine ages, and in fact, I'm glad that you guys are tasting those funny little bottles because it would have given a chance for the wine to open up even more.
Well, we do tell our customers to try and pre-pour about half an hour before some of the other wines, so especially the older ones. So hopefully they listen to us and they've behaved and got the maximum out of the wine. I've literally just posted. It's just so much freshness still for 2015, and lovely layers of complexity already sort of showing, but you still get a good punch of fruit there that sort of belays the fact that it's already got, 7-8 years on it.
Yeah, excellent. You're right, Charlie. I'm very proud of the wine. I mean, we're showing it now in the lineup. Often what one does when one's trying to, be a hard salesman about wine is you leave the punchy wine to the end. But in the lineup, I agree completely with the way the wine's about to go, because you'll taste now when you pour this, which is the Love to Hate, bless you, which is the Love to Hate Pinotage wine, or the Marmite wine of the South African wine industry. Now, geez, I do go on about Burgundy. I must stop, but let me talk about Bordeaux. Also love Bordeaux, of course. We'll get to that just now. And there we go. So this is the reserve range. This is the range that sits underneath the heritage range in terms of price, not necessarily in terms of quality and intrigue. So Pinotage, wow. I love Pinotage. I love Pinotage the way that I love Kilimanjaro. It's like it's a mountain that you have to climb if you're African. In fact, you should climb if you're human, because we're all African, of course. But the thing about Pinotage is that if you're a South African winemaker and you don't make it, it's like, why on earth? Well, just, I don't know, move to New Zealand or something. It's a variety you've got to grapple with. It's a variety that I made horrendous wines from for many years. I was very embarrassed. In fact, I keep them in my cellar. I've got a wine library here on the farm. I've got all my posh wines and won lots of awards. And then I've got like all my disasters. And when I'm feeling like I'm good at something, I always go and pull one of those bottles out, because it helps just remind me that I'm not that good. And it also sort of softens the blow of what inevitably is around the corner, which is a huge disappointment. So Pinotage, I've made some horrors in my life, and I've made wines that are literally undrinkable, despite the fact that I've done all sorts of things to them, like age them and try and cloak them in new wood and all sorts of other things. So Pinotage is I say Pinotage is like a twitchy racehorse. It can smell fear at 20 paces, and I think you've got to kind of grapple. It's a bit like Bobal. Who's had Bobal? Hands up. It's a wonderful variety from Spain. And it's a variety that I love working with in Spain, because it engenders the same fear and angst from winemakers, because it's such a difficult variety to produce any kind of subtlety or elegance out of. So for me, Pinotage is a variety that is difficult, but you cannot blame the variety for making a bad one. You cannot blame Monastrell for making a bad Jumia. You cannot, or Yekla, you cannot blame a Bobal for making a bad Bobal. You've got to blame yourself. And the wonderful, and I love this, because when you travel around Bordeaux, for example, and you come across a bad vintage of a Cabernet Merlot blend, no one ever says, oh, well, Cabernet is a crap variety. People say, well, the reason this is bad is because the guy's wife had an affair with a neighbor and he couldn't concentrate and he let the wine go off. Or, oh, it rained. It was a bad year, lots of rain. That's why it's all watery and green and horrible. Never blame the variety. As soon as you get a bad Pinotage, you blame the variety. Rubbish. The reason you've got a bad Pinotage is the guy's wife had an affair with the neighbor, or that rained too much. It's other shit that makes this thing happen. The variety itself is fantastic. And like those difficult varieties around the world, when they are good, and I agree, it's a slightly different mouthfeel to other varieties because of the way that the chemistry of the grape is, which I won't bore you about, but it can be absolutely sublime. And this is I don't know what you guys are selling it for, 12 quid or something, 13 quid or something, but it offers a punch and a concentration of flavor that very few varieties can get right with balance. So for me, there's one of the few varieties in my experience. The other one is Pinot Meunier, by the way, where in the vineyard it tastes of chocolate chip cookies, the grape. And we've got Pinotage planted on various farms that we go from, and the baboons go for the Pinotage. They will walk through the Merlot and to the Pinotage because they're the most delicious grapes to eat. Some people actually think you should make wine from them. They're so delicious. But if you can capture some of that deliciousness on the vine, and the trick is to treat it like Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is the mother. So it's a cross between Cinsault and Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is the mother. You must expect that if you got to treat Pinot Noir with kid gloves in the winery and with a lot of love and respect in the cellar, so should you treat Pinotage. And if you can get that right and find the right grapes and find the right site, which took me a long time to do, and then learn to deal with it with enormous amount of respect and with humbleness, and to actually take yourself as the winemaker a little bit out of the picture and let nature do its thing, then you have an opportunity to produce something that's like this, which I love. And we will be also doing a Pinotage under the Heritage range from a very special vineyard, also in the Brie de Kloof, where Chenin does well, Pinotage often does well. So cheers to the variety. Some people don't like. I absolutely love this. It's very, very different. It's something that knocks your socks off after the sort of real elegance of the movable feast and what that's trying to achieve. This is a bit more in your face, but I don't know, it's a third of the price or something.
Yeah, that's delicious. I think there's some really nice comments there, particularly from Nathan. I've got just a very quick question on the picture there, Bruce. There was something that was Pinotage and Cinsault. Is that a blend that you do, or was that two different bottles in one box?
No, that's a blend we do. But okay, so this is a very in your face. This is kind of like who watches English rugby? This is like Marla, this wine, front row forward, Mohican. Yeah, he's not taking any prisoners, but he's got a heart of gold, right? And he's actually very eloquent. He's a wonderful, wonderful bloke. That's what this wine is to me. You also get Pinotages which are steely and quite cerebral and crisp and crunchy with a lot more red fruit, depending on where they're grown and how they're made. Carbonic maceration is a big trick with Pinotage. So you can add all sorts of layers of red fruit complexity if you can get the carbonic right with it. We don't use carbonic on this, but that carbonic character Pinotage, which is really rich red, not rich, but red, crunchy, almost cherry fruit, just blends beautifully with Cinsault, which has similar characteristics to me. Pinotage, like Grenache Noir or Garnacha Tinto, has wonderful length because of the characteristics and the chemistry of the variety, whereas Cinsault is all, is quite a blousy variety. It's a lot of upfront fruit, wonderful mouth-filling fruit. So if you can put the two together, it's quite exciting. And of course, there's a chap down the road here at a winery at Elam called Conrad Flock, who makes his own wine, which is Pinotage, Pinot Noir, and Cinsault. So kind of like, he calls it the family tree, or the Afrikaans, which is Stamboom. And it's a delicious wine. It's amazing how well it works.
Nice. That all makes sense. Yeah, so just before we move on to the last wine, one last thing very quickly, because I don't think there needs to be much of a response, but I read on the website it goes surprisingly well with sushi. So I think everyone has to try that. That's a real thing.
Now you see, Cool Hand, were you like one of those guys who like always did more research and more homework than anyone else in the class?
Often I don't get to actually say anything. So yeah.
I think you're one of those guys. I'm because you've done brilliant research. That's exactly right. So I've been saying this for years, for maybe 15 years. The best food pairing in the entire world is sushi and Pinotage. You've got to try it, but you need a Pinotage like this. Don't go for the green carbonic style. Go for this upfront Marla style, because you want I'll tell you why. So Pinotage, unlike any other red grape variety that I know of, in the protein chain, I'm going to get a bit chemical here for a second, but in the protein chain, you have anthocyanidins or color compounds that are tied in at a much earlier stage than any other red variety, which is why you have this long length, like a Grenache Noir. And it handles particularly the wasabi and the kind of freshness, fishiness of sushi, the way that the actual grape variety is designed, or is the happenstance thereof. So you've got to go try it. Sashimi and Pinotage, it is a proper match made in heaven. Cool. Sustainable fish though. Eat sustainable fish. Okay. Cool, Luke. Well done, dude. Are we ready for the last one? How are we doing for time?
I think so. Yeah, we're just at the hour mark. So yeah, we got a few minutes to go on this one. So
okay. You see, I slowed down. You stopped me prattling. Okay. So I haven't actually had this vintage for a long time because we're already on in South Africa. We're 4 vintages ahead, 2018. And this is a wine under natural cork. So I'm always worried about the rubbish that is sent to the bottom of Africa. But that's perfect for me. Oh, nice. Okay. So where does the name come from? We'll start with that. If any of you have been to St. Mary Le Bow in Cheapside, you will know about this particular church. But if you haven't, it's well worth a visit. It was destroyed let's go back. It was one of the first places of Christian worship in the UK, and clearly that was because it was a place of pre-Christian worship, whatever form that would have taken. Various forms of church were built on the land, and in 1066. The Great Fire of London, it was destroyed and it was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren. One of the interesting factors is that he hardly changed anything in the design. So while a lot of churches that were rebuilt by Wren were embellished and their footprint changed, and St. Mary Le Bow basically was exactly the same. In fact, it's exactly the same height as it was prior to it being burnt down. And that is unique. And the question has always been asked, why did Wren do that? Just down the road, of course, literally 400 yards is St. Paul's, his great wedding cake masterpiece of a church, of a cathedral. And then this sort of what can sometimes be misconstrued as its poor architectural cousin, but in fact there's a wonderful English word, numinosity, which is the power that a place has to affect you emotionally. And it could be a redwood forest on the Sonoma coast of California, or it can be a standing in front of the Acropolis, or it could be literally go check out St. Mary Le Bow in Cheapside. It's the most powerful place as you enter these big, thick walls. Absolutely quiet. You can hardly hear the London traffic outside, and you immediately feel connected to some sort of veil of creativity that is beyond our understanding. The reason it was called that I called this Mary Le Bow is because my partner in this venture is a family called the Frater family, and a very good friend of mine who I was at school with, called James Frater, got me involved in planting the vineyards here in the mid-1990s. And then, unfortunately, his dad, whose vision it was to make a red blend. There we go. There's the farm. It's called Wildepaardekloof. It's isolated, high up in the mountains, 500 meters above sea level, in what is semi-desert country. So it's about a 4-hour drive from me. And you can imagine arriving there as a settler sort of 300 years ago into this mountainous area. This is actually a hidden valley. So behind you, where this photograph is taken from, is another valley, and it looks like that valley is where the mountain starts. And then you go through this tiny little crevice, in the mountains, and this opens up into the secret valley. It's quite extraordinary. Anyway, the Frater family farmed this for many years and asked me to change it from the kind of farm that it was into a vineyard, and plant varieties that were designed, and the clonal material or the selection was designed to fulfill Kenneth Frater, who was my friend's father's dream of making a wine, in his words, that trembled with power. So he was very, very much influenced by great European wines, and it was in their house as a youngster, sort of age of 12, that I first tasted Chateau Yquem and things like that. So it he had all the best first growths and stuff, and of course wonderful wines from other areas like Italy as well. And it was that sort of the image in which, and it wasn't a natural sort of thing for me to want to do. I always want to make wines that represent the land and represent the country first, rather than aping anywhere else. But this is a nod to Kenneth's vision. So it is very much old world in style from that perspective, with that, cigar box, pencil lead character, a lot of cassis, a lot of that black cherry, which you get from the Cabernet. And they had on the farm the oldest block of Cabernet in the country. It was Cabernet is a variety that's really been badly affected by a virus that affects vines in South Africa called leaf roll 3. And this, because of its isolation, and I think also because of the rootstock that it was planted on, which is another long, boring story, it has survived. And so that's what gives this wine its extraordinary elegance, but density as well. It's not sort of elegance that's going to get blown away in a gust. This is here to stay. This wine is going to. I mean, the first vintage was 2000, and there was an experimental vintage 2001. And we're tasting and drinking 2003s at home at the moment, and they're about there. So it's going to perform as well as any Bordeaux, and probably 3 times better than any Bordeaux at its price. And the idea is not to outdo Bordeaux, but the idea is to reflect the vision and the energy of the family, and do it in a way that they want to do. I don't know if you guys can see the label, because you've got your little plastic bottles. Can you see the Crusader sword on the label? So that's actually on the. I stole that from the pulpit of St. Mary-le-Bow. So you kind of know it was where a lot of the Crusades left from. In a rally where you have the cars go off that little podium and into the desert, and Mark Thatcher gets lost, that kind of thing. That's where a lot of the Crusades left from. I believe, and the reason it's called Mary-le-Bow is I don't really know. It was chosen by Angela Frater, who was Kenneth's wife. She's still alive. She's an absolute mensch. She's amazing. She's in her late 80s, and she's a matriarch and a second mother to me, really. She has intimated that the last night buried in the catacombs below St. Mary-le-Bow is her great grandfather or something, but I'm not really sure of the story. It's all hidden in secrecy, secret handshakes and things.
Happy days. But Bruce, I realized that we're getting close to just a little bit overrunning, so I'm sure everyone would love to carry on hearing you chat. So I just wanted to say to those that have obviously got other plans, or for a bit of dinner, need to head off, please do so. But otherwise, I'd love to spend a bit more time with Bruce, because he's a very busy man, and as you've seen, he's got fingers in a lot of pies across different countries. So getting you at home and enjoying and taking your mind off of the troubles locally to share some of your wines has been an absolute pleasure. And really, really enjoyable. I mean, my question is how did you end up with the blend at Mary-le-Bow? I'll let you answer that question in a minute, and then if anybody else wants to hop on and ask some questions, please do. Like I said, for those who are leaving thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. I think we're going to, as a team, we're going to take a little break from hosting virtual tastings. We're hoping that with the situation that we've got here in the UK, we can start doing some, what we'd like to do is hybrid tastings, where we'll get some of, for those of you who want to venture and join us, we'll do a tasting in a central London venue, but we'll still be doing some of these virtual tastings, obviously to join as many people together. But once again, thank you, Bruce. Those who need to go, do so. But Bruce, tell me how you ended up with the blend in the Marylebone Red.
Yeah, good question. It changes every year, dude. I'm not very good with consistency. So the 2014, it's what's good. So we always put the Cabernet in because it's this amazing vineyard, and always a bit of Shiraz, which is a contiguous vineyard to it. And then in 2014, I put Merlot in. I really can't remember. Sometimes the Merlot.
Apparently, according to the literature, this is where Cool Hand Luke should come up with percentages, but I'm going to have to do it. Apparently, you have 42% Shiraz, 33% Cabernet Sauvignon, 25% Merlot.
Well done. And unlike other countries, that's correct, because in South Africa, we've got a thing called the Wine and Spirit Board, which checks these things. So everything that you see on a label of a South African wine actually has been checked by somebody, not just a paper trail, but someone's actually come to the winery. That's unique. There's another interesting fact about South Africa before I talk about the boring blend, which is that on every bottle of South African wine, there is a number. That is the only national agricultural product, never mind wine, think any agricultural product in the world where every single unit has its own identifiable number. How cool is that? How cool is that, people? And that means that little number, you can put it into a website. It'll tell you exactly where the grapes are from, who the winemaker was. In fact, you can go into as much detail as finding out what the number plate of the tractor was that took the grapes out of the vineyard at what time and delivered it to the winery. That's called we call it a seal. And it's controlled by a Department of Agriculture sub thing called South African Wine Industry Services. So yeah, we're very proud of that. The blend, you know, the vineyard has the Cab, it has the Shiraz, it has Merlot and Cabernet Franc, and we take bits of the best blocks to our winery here on the estate, and whatever tastes good, we plonk in the bottle to make the best wine. So that I think this whole obsession with blends and varieties is a bit weird. In my experience, the idea is to do what's right for the wine, and what I mean by that is to make the best possible wine, and that means that if you don't have a lot of great grapes, don't make such a big wine. Make a smaller wine, and make sure that you keep the consumer in mind, because at the end of the day, this doesn't stop once you put the wine in the bottle. It stops when that last sip of the bottle is consumed and that customer has had a good sleep, had a great dinner, had good dreams, wakes up the next morning and thinks, well, that was a wonderful evening I had last night, and doesn't even know. And if we've achieved that, that's kind of our mission in life. So you kind of got to start from that point. I start from, the morning after, and work all the way back to the vineyard.
A laudable way of doing of making your wines. Just thinking about the end consumer, because it's not always the way that it works. So, James, have you got any questions? Because funnily enough, Bruce, James, who now is our FD, has worked with you in the past in another guise as another business.
Bruce, it's good to see you.
I'm going to put my glasses on.
James. Bruce, it's been years and years. There's been a few stylistic changes at my end, but it's very good to see you again.
You look great, dude.
Thank you.
Nice to
wonderfully
see you.
Entertaining as always. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's just such a privilege to be chatting to you guys. I really do feel very privileged. These opportunities are few and far in between, and we we grasp them with both hands, and we're just so grateful that we have a market, and we're so grateful that we're able to, share our passion. I mean, we're not making rockets, we're just making little bottles of joy, and it's wonderful that that we can do so with like-minded people. I call you guys the Wine Tribe, James, as you know. We're part of a tribe that's interested in this product that has been with us forever. In a way, I have this fascination with alcohol consumption and civilization. I think the two go hand in hand. And it's been with us through thick and thin, and world wars and pandemics before, and it's going to be here forever. So, look, alcohol in itself can be a pretty destructive drug, but in the form of wine, with its complexity and its history and its incredible, rich cultural edifices and associations, makes it so tangible and so beguiling to get involved in. You can travel through time, you can travel through history and understand cultures and see why people did things by following the history and of wine. And as drugs go, it's cool that it's legal, and it's at least in some countries. It's not legal in South Africa, which is a real pain. So we're struggling with that a bit, which is crazy. Unjustifiable, but the fact that it is a cerebral thing, and that it can add so much to a conversation and so much to a gathering. There's an element of communion about wine, and on many different levels, which is very special. And there's something wonderfully humbling about just being involved in the production thereof. And of course, James, you're the guy that makes it all work. Because unless the numbers work, nothing works.
You keep telling us, yeah.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. This is the thing that we got to get right. Is that while one of the reasons why the wine industry is peopled with so many fun people, and why the industry itself is so rewarding, is because nobody who's in this industry is going to get rich. Sorry, Nathan. I'm sorry if they sold you that idea when you got involved, but the reality is that we're in this for other reward. There's a spiritual reward beyond the financial, because of its encompassing nature. And so the people that are attracted to it, and the people that become fascinated by it, and the people that enjoy it, are actually genuinely interested in much more important things, and things that really give long, sustainable pleasure and importance. And I think that's kind of what I'm so proud of, and what I'm so privileged by. And that's why being able to share an evening like this, and the wines are showing well, by the way. I'm really chuffed there. Well, I don't know if it's a fruit day or whatever, but I'm having a lot of fun.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's very much the ethos that Nathan and Tom, who's not on the call this evening, pretty much set up Honest Grapes. It was about the enjoyment over anything over and above of the wine world. It was actually just really understanding the passion and the attention and care that goes into these wines, and making sure that the people who drink them are very excited and willing to share that journey, and not just looking for something that tastes good or just at a price point. And so it's very much something that Honest Grapes is one of their sort of our foundation stone. And Nathan could probably say a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, for me, wine is a serious pleasure you share with friends. Okay, and taking wine seriously in the way you do, and making wines that are frankly very surprising. I mean, I didn't start this tasting thinking the wines would be as stunning as this. It's what Honest Grapes is all about. We curate the selection of wines that we offer very heavily. We only offer a couple of hundred wines at any time, and it's very important for my business partner Tom and myself that we just offer wines that are going to give this sense of place, this sense of thrill. And your effort today, despite the circumstances in South Africa at the moment, to share your wines with us, it's been an absolute revelation and tremendous. And by the way, you were saying it's not rocket science. The rest of my business is rocket science. So I'm actually quite involved. Seriously, seriously, the rest of my business
It
is in space technology. So
Excellent.
I've gone from space technology during the day to having a drink in the evening. And hey, that's the fun it should all be about.
Exactly. No, that's fantastic, Nathan. Well, thank you very much. Those words are, well spoken and well received. Appreciate it very much. And I maybe the last comment is from my side is that you guys are part of the, you're part of the process. We're part of the team actually, but the kind of it doesn't matter how good the team is and how good the players are. If no one's going to watch the game, none of it exists. And so the consumer is really the most important cog in the wheel that makes it all work. I must refer you to a book called The History of Drunkenness. Oh, I've lost you. Have I lost you?
No, you're still there.
No,
you didn't fall over. That you've lost us.
I'm so used to our electricity going down. So you've got to Google it. The History of Drunkenness. I can't. Kat, do you remember who the author was? If you're still online, you got to read it. It's absolutely fascinating. You'll love it because it touches on rocket science as well as and goes all the way back to Babylonia and the earliest recorded stuff that we still have about winemaking and particularly alcohol consumption. It's a fascinating little read. A very talented guy, lives in London.
Mark Forsyth.
Mark Forsyth, thank you. Well done, Kat. Jeez, you're amazing. Mark Forsyth, The History of Drunkenness. Get it. You'll read it in a couple of nights. It's a very small little book. And it kind of, for me, encapsulates a lot about why this industry and this particular product is so exciting.
Excellent. So that sounds like a brilliant tip. I think that, along with the pinotage and sushi, we're all going to take away and get to at the earliest possible opportunity.
And the sheep alarm.
And the sheep alarm.
And the sheep alarm, yeah. That's a South African invention, by the way. The guys made a lot of money in places like Australia. So the little sheep alarm sits at the bottom of the sheep. I'll tell you how it works. And then it gets used to the gait of the sheep. And then, of course, if the sheep suddenly starts sprinting, the alarm goes off and it sends the thing to your phone and it sends a little GPS positioning thing. And then you have to go out there with your shotgun and hope you don't find anything to shoot. It's
obviously heading for Tokyo.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Bruce and Catherine. There's been some really lovely comments here on the chat. Read quite a few of them out, but thank you for everyone for attending.
Pleasure, guys.
I'm sure you won't have missed all of the Bordeaux chat that's been going on recently, but there's we've got tons of really good wines. If anyone has any questions about Bordeaux going forward, that's obviously been the main theme for a little while. Get in touch with myself, Charlie, or Angus in particular, and we would love to hear from you about that. As Charlie mentioned, there's a bit of a hiatus on the tastings front. We've got Team Amaya coming up, but dates to be confirmed on that. So we're having a little bit of a summer break. But thank you very much again to Bruce and Catherine. It's been a real pleasure. Really appreciated having you on tonight, particularly considering the circumstances. But the wines were showing brilliantly, and everyone's really enjoyed them. So yeah.
And now for those rugby aficionados, let's hope that we're losing against South Africa on the Lions South Africa match. So
yeah,
fingers crossed. But you know what? We've got some excellent wines to drown our sorrows with afterwards. So it's a win-win either way. Bruce, thanks again.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Terrific wines. Really
Wonderful privilege. Thank you.